Well, hey everyone. It's so good to be doing another live stream. It's been a minute since I've done one of these. Let me know in the chat real quick if you can hear me. I am no live stream expert, so it's always nice to get that feedback of this is indeed working. And just a quick, shameless plug. I'm getting a new merch provider. I like it a lot more. It's embroidered. Got this new hat. I also got a haircut. Anyway, this stuff will be releasing soon. This was the sample. I need to move the logo a little bit. But that is what's up. So no one has told me if you can hear me yet. I'm going to assume you can because no one's telling me, Austin, why are you talking and we can't hear you? You can. Look at that. You win. I suppose there's just a slight delay. So why are we doing a live stream tonight? Well, I suppose there's a couple of reasons. One, Eliza, very rudely, is on a trip to not really rudely. Her and my mom are on a lovely trip to California, a little girls' trip that the boys weren't invited on. And so I'm home alone. And I thought, well, what better to do than to do a live stream? But also because I enjoy doing these. I really enjoy getting to work through the questions that you guys have. They sharpen my thinking. And I hear that some of you guys enjoy them. So that is what we're doing today. You might have seen in the thumbnail that we were going to talk a little bit about icons, a little bit about prayers to saints. There's a rosary in the picture. What is going on there? Well, we'll talk about that, and we're going to get there. And the reason that we're going to talk about that, one, is I think it's an important topic, and it's not one that I've talked about much on the channel. We're also going to talk about it because, well, you guys asked. So I suppose I could keep you waiting and fumble around with other questions, talk about updates on the channel, all of those things, and that's tempting. It'd be good for YouTube watch time. But we'll just jump into that question because that's probably why some of you are here. And it looks like some of you guys are kind of already answering the question in before the stream started of I'm going to answer this way or not, which I found intriguing. I suppose to recap, in the past, I've said that one of my hang-ups with Catholicism and Orthodoxy is prayers to saints. And for a long time, that was true. Intuitively, it just felt wrong. If we can pray directly to God, well, why would we ask for someone else to do it? I know. We ask people on earth to do it, but I just hadn't ever been given a model of people doing that with saints in heaven. And so it felt strange. And something about it felt a little wrong. We are going kind of around the back door to God, and it just felt inefficient. But my thinking has evolved in that. Or rather, it's been an interesting journey. Because not too long ago, I found myself coming back to this question of prayers to saints. And I was thinking specifically about Mary is kind of where it started. And I was going through, trying to give inventory of my thoughts and what do I think about this? And I didn't pray to Mary at that point. I didn't pray to saints, and it just felt like, no, I don't do this. But as I was racking my brain for reasons why, none of them were really all that satisfying. I found that I didn't do it because I didn't want to do it, or rather because it just felt like I shouldn't do it. Maybe some of you guys can relate to that. That at some point in that journey, it really was an intellectual question. I'd worked through the arguments and I understood the arguments, but the hang up was just not wanting to and not wanting to do something that felt like it could be really wrong. But I had to look and say, I don't actually see a good reason not to. And so for that reason, I've kind of slowly began exploring that. Now, it's not a hallmark of my prayer life, but I no longer have a real intellectual qualm with praying to the saints, Mary included. And if that's the case, then I've been trying to figure out, well, what would that look like? And I've really just only dipped my toe in the waters. I mean, it's behind me. You can't see it. There's a lot of books. But I was working through an Orthodox prayer book for a bit, and there's some work in there, some prayers in there to Mary. And at first it just felt wrong, but then when I'd go back to that intellectual state and say, why why can't I ask for Mary's intercession? I'd say, I don't really have that good of a reason. I'd say, okay, like, we'll just go with this. I was given a rosary by a monk, and at first I was like, I could never pray a rosary. Like, that is way too Catholic. And then I kind of began exploring it a little. I'll say I don't really pray the rosary consistently, but I do actually pretty much every morning now. I really love the Divine Mercy Chaplet. I think it's beautiful, and there is like a small Hail Mary in there. But anyway, the question actually that sparked this was, do I have any prayer practices that would be strange to Protestants? I'm pretty sure that would be strange to a lot of Protestants. Now, with that out of the way, and we can talk about this, please ask follow-up questions in a bit. I'm not looking at the questions yet because I'm trying to get through this initial piece that some of you might have come to this video for. The other question is icons. Now, for a while, I've had icons in the back of my videos, and you might say, why don't I have icons now? Is it because Gavin Ortland's video on it changed my mind and I took all the icons down? Well, I love Gavin, but no, I took the icons down because I moved and haven't put them back up yet because I kind of need to mount them, but I'm not actually sure if I'm allowed to do that in my lease. I just need to figure out a way to do it. I need to figure out a way to put them up. So yeah, icons. What are my thoughts on icons? Well, this is an interesting one. I don't really have any problems with icons. Well, there's different levels of this, right? So can we have icons? Obviously, I have icons. I don't think icons are bad qua icons, okay, right? But that's not really what we mean by our icons, okay, right? Like, we're not talking about religious pictures. Fundamentally speaking, that's probably not a correct way to talk about an icon. What's often a bigger question is venerating icons, and is kind of John of Damascus's idea of that the veneration that we give to icons passes through to that person. Is that accurate? And can we say that the incarnation allows for that? Okay, well, I don't have any problems with that arguing. I think it's actually pretty theologically accurate. I think it's theologically sound. There's another question, though, that Gavin Ortland has brought up quite a bit in his recent videos on icons, and that is that icons are a late development. Historically, I don't think he's wrong. Now, I think there's some evidence for maybe some early icon usage, and maybe theologically we can put it in there. But I do think that there is some development, certainly with the veneration of icons. Now, I had a great time in my undergrad getting to do work on like the Dura Europos temple. We can get really nerdy there and talk about religious imagery within Judaism, and then the imagery that was at the early Christian church there in Dura Europos. If you're not familiar with that, give it a Google. It's fascinating stuff. So I'm not saying there wasn't any early on, but I do think the place of icons in worship developed. That doesn't bother me particularly. Now, depending on how you think about the Second Council of Constantinople, I think it was, the Seventh Ecumenical Council, and what they mean by like that this is apostolic and it's been there since the beginning, that's where you could get into some trouble. And frankly, I'm just not qualified enough to weigh in on that heavily. But my short answer on icons is they don't bother me. Even like veneration of icons doesn't really bother me. I do think it's a development, but I don't think it's really a bad development. I think worries about idolatry are super fair. Like, I don't want to downplay that. And this might sound kind of liberal of me, or like postmodern here, but I wouldn't encourage anyone to venerate an icon if they felt like that was idolatry. Like, I think that would be a bad thing to do. But if you do find those theological arguments compelling, I just don't see that then as a big problem. Anyway, I've rambled here for a little bit, so it's time to go to some questions. Hopefully that was helpful. One thing that is helpful for me is that if you have a question for me, preface it with a Q. Otherwise, it might just be kind of conversations back and forth, which aren't bad things. In fact, I hope that you all have conversations back and forth in the chat. I'd prefer them to be charitable, all things considered. But just put a Q with your questions so that as I'm scrolling through, I can find them quickly. Ooh, command strips. Good shout out on command strips. I think I have some command strips. It's a perfectly sensible idea. Command strips. Okay. Let's see. Questions. Someone just commented dulia hyperdulia latria. Oh, here's a question. Okay. Oh, and it's Bonnie. Bonnie, I hope you're doing well. Bonnie is one of my lovely patrons. She has been in the book clubs that we're doing, which just a quick plug for the book clubs. Currently, we're going through the Book of Pastoral Rule by St. Gregory the Great. It's fascinating, and I love going through these books with people. And so, Bonnie, great to see you. Bonnie asks, will you be visiting venues like you have in the past? Various seminaries, monasteries, or retreat centers, live services, and so on. Yes, in fact, some exciting updates here. In 2 weeks' time, I will be touring the first ever Catholic cathedral in the U.S., built in the U.S. There's some technicalities here, because there was one like built in New Orleans before it, but New Orleans wasn't part of the U.S. when it was built. But this one in Baltimore was the first U.S. Catholic cathedral, because the first Catholic archdiocese in the U.S. was in Maryland, which just happens to be where I live. And this basilica is like 10 minutes down the street, and I'm delighted to be doing a tour there coming up soon. I absolutely love doing church tour videos. They're my favorite videos to make, but they do take a lot of time. That's why I don't make as many of them as I would like. Most of you might know this, some of you might not. I work full-time in addition to doing YouTube. YouTube I do on nights and weekends, well, because I love it. And my patrons, like Bonnie, help the channel keep going by supporting it so that I can have the stuff to do it. And hopefully my goal will be that one day I could spend even more time creating the content that you guys enjoy and doing the things that I love, and allow YouTube to take up more and more of my life and kind of offset other things. But for now, I'm only doing as many as I can. But in addition to touring the Basilica of Baltimore, Eliza and I will be doing a tour or kind of retreat at St. Anselm's Abbey, which I've already done a video at, but we've gotten really close with one of the monks there. He was there when I did the tour, and he was a brother then. He's now a father, Father Ignacio. So excited to see him. I've been there. We've had him over for dinner. Now both of us are going to stay at the monastery. It's going to be a joyous time. We're going to go around and see some of the Catholic sites in DC. There's just so much there. We're going to go to the St. John Paul II shrine. Might go to the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception and go through like the Crypt Church there. There's just a lot of really beautiful stuff in DC that he's going to show us around. I think we're going to go to the Franciscan Monastery of the Holy Land. It's going to be a jam-packed fun time. And then I do really want to visit an Orthodox monastery in Wheeling, West Virginia. I just need to coordinate that. But my best friend has been an Orthodox inquirer for a bit, and he really wants to go. And so I think we're going to go together, which should be a great time. So there you go. Those are some upcoming monastery church tour things coming up. All right, let me scroll through for questions. Oh, Bonnie, you're almost walking again. That is so good to hear. Okay. And I do also have to say that I did take some questions earlier on, so I've got YouTube up as well. I do want to cover this one. So this one didn't come from one of you. I promise we'll get to your questions in a minute. But someone asked me, what do I think of the recent church splits and the recent big splits in Protestantism? And they mentioned Anglicans, Methodists, Southern Baptists. I think they're really lamentable. I think it's sad. I think it's something that should cause us sorrow in a lot of ways. That I don't think it was ever the vision to see the church at odds, to see Christians at odds with one another, right? What is Jesus praying in John 17? That they may be one as we are one. And that's certainly just not the lived reality today. That there is so much infighting. And it's not just in Protestantism, I might add, that we're seeing just terrible, terrible infighting across the Christian tradition. And I think it's something that should break our hearts. I think it's something that should lead us to prayer. I think it's something that should lead us to repentance for the various ways that we could contribute to this divisiveness in the church. Not that we want to have a false unity where there is no unity of belief and we're just kind of papering over it by staying kind of hierarchically together. So I think it's sad that these splits have happened. In some ways, I think it's inevitable that within these communions or communities, there's just becoming such divergent theologies, especially around human sexuality. And I think it's something that we really just need to dive deeply into in the church, to think about human sexuality and what that means. And man, I felt it firsthand in churches that I've been a part of, and what these questions can do. And it's sad, and it's unfortunate, but it is where we are, specifically around questions of human sexuality. It's dividing churches, and they're questions that we're going to need to answer, whether it's something that's come up in your church yet or not. It will, and we need to be thinking about them. We can talk more about that if you want, but I did see that question, and I just want to say it's super sad. And someone else asked me just what I think about the Episcopal Church specifically, and man, this is such a sad one to me in a lot of ways. So just last week, I was in Chicago for probably the most beautiful wedding that I've ever attended. It was for my dear friend Daisuke, one of my best friends from college, and he got married in this just stunning Episcopal church from the 1860s. One of our professors did the wedding. Another professor was a reader. It was just incredible. And the church was beautiful, and they used a liturgy from the 1920s, and it was communion, kneeling at an altar rail. Like, it was just fantastic. And what the reason I started that it's sad is because within the Episcopal Church, I think there's such beautiful potential for a richness of liturgy, for pulling on a lot of what I just see as the best of the church between liturgy, potential for really good kind of sacramental theology. But so much of it's bankrupt today. I mean, I've talked to that professor, and it's like, yeah, I love being Episcopal in this church, but look, you could have a bishop in that church that doesn't believe in the resurrection, right? And you could have all types of confusion around different, let's just say, hot topics culturally. And for all the beauty of the liturgy, I think there's really deep problems within the Episcopal Church, which is sad, because I wish it wasn't, because I think it could be a beautiful place for people that want a Protestant identity, but with all of the beauty of a deep kind of sacramental theology and a beautiful liturgy. But unfortunately, that's just not the reality today in most cases. Am I too quiet, by the way? Let me know if I'm too quiet. It looked like the bar was a little low there. All right, let's go into some questions. All right. This is a good question. And I was actually working on a video on the topic of ecumenism. I've got a couple principles for ecumenism that I want to lay out in a future video, because I don't know if some of you saw, but I recently did a poll, and I found out that my audience right now is like a third Catholic, a third Protestant, and a third Orthodox, which is just absolutely exciting to me. It's crazy what this platform has become, and the way that it's able to bring people together from across different divides. It's just a beautiful thing, and I love it. But within that, there's a question of, okay, well, so you're involved in ecumenism, Austin. Do you think that this will ever work? Will we actually bring Orthodox and Catholic churches together, and how would it be? I'm generally quite an optimist. I don't want to say this could never happen, because I think it could, but I don't see it happening soon. I don't see it happening in my lifetime. Lord willing, if I have kids, it probably won't happen in theirs, though perhaps it could. I would love to be wrong about this. But I just think at this point, I don't want to say the ship has sailed, but in a lot of ways it has. That as these churches have gone in their own way, that they have solidified in their unique identities, which in some ways draws them further apart. I do think there is a desire, especially from the Roman Catholic side, to bring about that unity, right? I mean, Pope John Paul II talked a lot about kind of breathing with both lungs and deeply desiring this, but it would somewhat have to be on their terms. They're not going to be able to pull back on papal infallibility. I don't think that would work, and I don't actually think that's good ecumenism, to begin changing doctrine to unite the church. I actually think that's a false ecumenism, and is the reason a lot of people don't like ecumenism, but I don't think that's actually ecumenism. I think ecumenism doesn't drive the development of doctrine, but it helps us explore the distinctives of our doctrines and see if we're as far apart as we thought. And that's why I think early on in the kind of ecumenical movement, there was an ability to make some quick wins, to realize oh, we were just saying things differently. We actually are closer together than we thought. But once you realize, like, okay, and there are these things that we're just still divided on, I don't see either side wanting to budge. I don't see the Orthodox accepting the universal immediate jurisdiction of the Pope, and I don't see them accepting Vatican I or the Filioque, though I think the Filioque could actually... I think Rome might have a little more give on that. But yeah, I don't see it happening. I would love to be wrong. I would be overjoyed to be wrong. And just along similar lines, whether I think like the Protestant Catholic division is going to be reunited, again, I would say I don't think so. But I don't think that makes ecumenism worthless. I actually think that just learning to understand one another, learning to co-labor in the things that we can co-labor on, learning from one another, deepening our theology by engaging with one another, I think those are beautiful outcomes of ecumenism. And I think simply learning to live peacefully as brothers and sisters is a beautiful thing. So I don't think we're going to see like a visible hierarchical union anytime soon, but I don't think that's a reason to stop desiring that and to stop doing the work of getting to know one another across those divisions. Okay. More questions. Drink of water. Apparently I never answered Jack's questions. Jack, what were your questions? Let's find... It's fine. I can search for questions. Jack. Okay. Jack, you asked... I got you. Do you believe in conditional or unconditional election to predestination? As a Catholic, we can choose, question mark. I don't know if that's a question mark about being able to choose, if it's a question about it being a ha. Anyway, no need to overanalyze your question. Do I believe in conditional or unconditional election? I lean towards a conditional election. I went into my undergrad kind of firmly Arminian, as much as I could be, having not read Arminius or Calvin for that point, but just having these preconceptions of what Calvinists believe and what Arminians believe. And I thought just kind of at a like basic level that Calvinism didn't make sense. In college, I got to study under some brilliant Calvin scholars, read through the entirety of the Institutes, and really get to know Calvin and really get to appreciate the beauty of Calvin's theology in a lot of ways. I think Calvin was a brilliant thinker. I think he had a lot of good intentions. I think he pointed out a lot of things that were bad in the church at the time. And my theology is probably better for having studied Calvin. With that being said, I still just see his picture of the way of unconditional election in that system. It's difficult for me to stomach. I also don't think it's a necessary way to read scripture. I think it's a way you could read scripture. I think there's a validity to that reading. But because I don't think it's necessary, it's not one I'm interested in adopting. Maybe that's not the best theological method. But as long as both are on the table, and as long as I think you can faithfully read scripture in either direction, I would really just rather not read it as unconditional election, because I don't like what it does to God in that way. So I'm much more comfortable with like the word synergy than Calvin would have been, and some of his students today, and that's fine. I think we can still get along, and I could be wrong, but that is where I come to that. Jack, I answered your question. Don't say I never did it. All right. Let's see. Okay, someone else asked a similar question to this on YouTube, and Gandalf the Greatest Wizard, good to see you. I always enjoy your comments. I feel like I've seen a lot of really quality comments from you in the past. So any thoughts on universalism? First, I would love for it to be true. Second, I'm not sure it is. That's kind of the most basic understanding of it. So someone else asked me, put differently, do I think that universal reconciliation or apokatastasis is heretical? As a Protestant, it can be somewhat difficult to define the lines of heresy without like a defined magisterium. That notwithstanding, I really wish it wasn't heresy, but I think, if we look at the tradition, I think it's hard to say that apokatastasis has not been rejected just by looking at the ecumenical councils. And so this is one of those areas where I think sometimes in theology, we have to say, I'm not God. I don't get to decide how it is. And as much as I would love, as much as I think it would be great if God was a universalist, I don't think the tradition has left that open to us very much. And so, yeah, I don't think I'd call myself a universalist, but it's not a doctrine I like. I suppose inversely, hell is not a doctrine I like particularly, but that's where that is. I saw that got a dislike. I can live with that. Okay. All right. Sean Quinn. Sorry if this was already asked. I just got here a few minutes ago. Are you consistently attending a regular church? If so, what is it like and what do you think? Yes, I do consistently go to church. I think all Christians should. And I don't think that investigating church history and trying to discern the true church is a good reason at all to stop going to church and forsake the assembly of the believers. So I just want to put that point out there, that if you are someone like me who has been on this journey of investigating these things, please do not do it apart from the church, but do it from within the church. Okay, that point notwithstanding, do I go to church? Yes. What is it like? It is a non-denominational, intentionally ecumenical church that was started by my youth pastor. I think if some of you went there, you'd be surprised that I go there. And in a lot of ways, I go there because I love the people there. And it's people that I've gone to church with since I was a kid, and is a comfortable place to be and kind of exercise some of the gifts that I feel God has given me as I'm exploring these things. I also technically, I suppose, go to mass about as often as I do that. I go to daily mass at least once a week. There's a church right down the street from me, and I just like being in church. I love church, and the opportunity to sit in church and pray. I sit in the very back pew. I'm probably the only person there under 60, and I just go and pray. I was there yesterday morning. I usually go once a week to that. And I wish more churches had daily services. I think that's a delightful thing. And I'm glad that the Catholic Church does that. And so technically, I guess I go there as much as I do go to the non-denominational church, but I'm involved in very different ways. And so I think it would be disingenuous to say that my engagement there is at the same level. But that is what I do. This is an interesting question. I won't try to pronounce that. Asks, from your understanding, is Orthodox basically Roman Catholic without the Pope? I think to put it that way would be... No, is my short answer. So I think there's maybe a superficial surface level take in which you could say a qualified yes in terms of like the hierarchical structure. Like, okay, you're going to have priests, deacons, and bishops in both. But the addition in Roman Catholicism is you got a pope. So that's the difference. But I think that is only kind of the most cursory engagement with it. I think over time, the East and the West have developed very different. Now, I know there are Eastern Catholics. I get that. But I think generally speaking, that even like as early as like the Cappadocian Fathers in the 4th century, there's becoming kind of differences in ways of talking about theology. Not irreconcilable differences, but different flavors. But I think over time, those have solidified in different ways of approaching things. Some of those have been incorporated in Roman Catholicism, or in Catholicism via Eastern Catholicism. But I don't think it's fair to say that it's just the same thing without the Pope. I think the approach to theology is different. I don't think it's so different that it's irreconcilable, but I think it's different. The liturgies are different, which is not inconsequential. I think it's actually very important. And just even culturally, I think there are big differences there. So maybe structurally, you could say there are some ways that it's kind of like Roman Catholicism without a pope. But even there, I think the way that you're going to conceive of your ecclesiology is kind of Eucharistic versus papal in a way. Is going to be different. So no, I would not say that. But it's a great question. Okay. I need water. Will says I passed over his question. Perhaps I did. There's lots of questions in there. Did you put Q at the front, Will? All right. I'll search for it because you said I passed over it. Oh, it turns out. Okay. Will, this is your question. I know this is off topic, but why do you think Christ spoke in the future tense in John 6:51? Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood, and the bread that I will give for the life of the world is my flesh. The bread that I will give for the life. Yeah, I mean, someone else responded because Christ hadn't been crucified yet, and I would agree. So I would read John 6 sacramentally in terms of speaking about the real presence in the Eucharist, and for that reason, I think it makes good sense that Jesus would speak in the future tense there because he can't give his flesh without having already given it. Now, that does get into really interesting things at the Last Supper of like, how is this your flesh if you haven't died? Okay. But for John 6, I don't think that's a particular problem. So that's how I'd answer that. Okay, more questions. Just so you guys realize, there are 164 comments in here already. So I will try to get to your questions. Matthew Matt. Is your name Matthew Matt? Like, is that your actual name? Because that's pretty cool. Do you currently attend an Orthodox church? I do not. Why do I not attend an Orthodox church? Because I can't is not fair. Okay, if Orthodox churches in my area had daily masses, I would go, or daily divine liturgies, I would go. I love the divine liturgy. As it is, they do not. They have services at 10 a.m., at which point I have committed already to be at the church that I attend and that I volunteer at, and so I can't go there. I would have to stop going to the church I go to, and well, seeing as I'm not Orthodox, that would not seem to be a prudent thing to do. So I don't currently. I would like to attend a Vespers some Saturday. I haven't done that yet. There's not one super close, although I'm spoiled in that I live in an area where everything's really close. And so when I say there's not one super close, I'm talking like 20 minutes for which I know some of you are saying I drive over an hour to get to my local Orthodox church because that's the closest one. So that excuse isn't that strong. But no, I do not currently attend one. But it's not for lack of enjoying Orthodox divine liturgies. Okay. Oh no, is someone not being respectful of Gavin? I quite like Gavin, so I'd prefer that people weren't disrespectful of him. Haley, thanks for that. Okay, yeah, so that's an interesting comment. Hugh posited that Gavin Ortland is seeking to be the ruin of souls. I don't think that's true. I've gotten to know Gavin fairly well over the time, and not just through interviews, but through offline conversations. And of course, none of us can know the heart of another, but I have no indication that that is Gavin's intention. And I don't think there's any reason to actually think that, because for Gavin to seek to be the ruin of souls, he would have to think that he is wrong, that the Catholic and Orthodox churches are in fact the true church, or one of them is, right? So he would have to be convinced that he is wrong, but actively be choosing to convince others of what he deems to be wrong and something that would ruin their souls. I get no hint that that's the case, and I don't think there's any reason to think that. So I think charity demands of us to not place that kind of construction on another. Now, you could say that Gavin Ortland is ruining souls. I would disagree with you, but in that case, you're not kind of putting malintent on him. But you could be saying that he's wrong and he's trying to convince people that the Catholic Church is wrong when it is in fact right, which could be bad for souls. You can make that argument. I don't think Gavin would have any issue with you making that argument, but I do think it's best to not place motives on people that we couldn't discern. Okay, let's get on to something else. Okay, someone has asked this question a lot of times, so let's just talk about it. If this answer gets me demonetized, I mean, maybe you could subsidize it with a super chat. What do you think about the LGBTQ movement in the church? Okay. I might talk around this a bit. Well, what do I think about the movement in the church? There's a lot of different ways of addressing this. I think, one, just kind of objectively, it's ripping the church apart right now, right? That within the Anglican Church, the Methodist Church, I mean, even with what we've got going on with the German bishops, the German Catholic bishops, right now, it is the major issue of our time in the church that is fracturing the unity of the church. And that, I think, is unfortunate. Unfortunate, to put it lightly. I think that fundamentally, when we come to this question, we're talking past one another. Those that have a kind of more conservative view, more traditional view, and those that are advocating for something new, a new way of approaching things in the church. I think that it's just a completely different epistemology. It's a different hermeneutic. And I think we're just not making much progress talking to one another. Here's what I would say to people that are on the more traditional side, where I would place myself. I do think we want to be careful in assuming malintent for all of these people. And to go from these people are wrong to they are evil. People who are kind of promoting a non-traditional view. I don't think that's always the case. I think there are people that are really, really trying to think about this well, and are coming to a different conclusion. And I think in the absence of authority, which we have a lot of in the Protestant church, it's creating chaos. And it's a chaos that is not good for the church and is not fruitful to the Christian witness. So I think we need to figure this out. I think, likewise, we have in the church not always done well in our interactions with people who identify as LGBTQ. I think we can just kind of take that as fact, that not all of those engagements have been fruitful or particularly loving. And I imagine there's areas of repentance in that. But that does not necessarily mean changing the views. I could talk about this a long time. I'm going to try not to. I will add, though, that increasingly I'm convinced that in 15 years or so, Protestant churches will either be open and affirming, or they will cease permitting, they will either be open and affirming, or they will take a more conservative view on human sexuality than they currently do. And I imagine that would include rethinking views on birth control, because I do think it is a little difficult to hold a consistent theology that is both affirming for birth control and non-affirming for LGBTQ relationships. That's a big one to get into, but that essentially boils down to the place of the sexual act having both a unitive and procreative element, and that taking that line and having to have both of those makes it a lot easier and a lot more consistent and feel less cherry picking towards the LGBTQ passages than I think the current way of doing it. Okay, that was a long-winded, not great answer, but hopefully that was somewhat helpful. Someone said, if that's a bedroom in Chicago, you need to move. Bedrooms are much bigger in Texas. This is a bedroom in the Baltimore, D.C. suburbs, which are also very similarly sized to Chicago ones, and I'm sure are much smaller than those in Texas. Yeah, we just did that fun adulting thing where you move somewhere for half the space and twice the money, but c'est la vie, the jobs are here. Specifically, Eliza's job is here. Okay. Luke 137 said, thanks for responding, brother. I don't know if it was actually my pleasure, but it's an answer that needs given. Jordan Knox, what do you think about the Catholicity argument for Protestantism? I assume what you mean here is that Protestantism allows for the greatest Catholicity in approach to who might be saved. Recently in Gavin Ortland's video, I think it was like 3, 4, 5 reasons to be Protestant. I don't remember. It was between 3 and 5. One of them was that it's the Orthodox. You kind of have this idea that the Orthodox Church, and then everyone kind of branched away and non-Christian. And you could say kind of similar with Catholics. You have those splits, and it's only the Catholic Church. And what is a merit of Protestantism is that you can say that there are branches of the Christian tree, and you can thus be more Catholic by having all of them. I don't think it's an argument for truthfulness, but I do think it's a affective, like with an A, argument, in that it does appeal to a sensibility that I would share, that we don't want to unnecessarily limit the bounds of the church. Now, what you could make it an argument for truthfulness is say, and Jesus had a view of the church that should be more Catholic, or the New Testament has a view that should be more Catholic. Protestantism has that same Catholic view, therefore Protestantism is more true. I think that's a harder argument to make, but I think if you want to say that, hey, like if you want to have a view of the church where more people are in, Protestantism has that. I generally want to have a bigger umbrella picture of the church. Protestantism does have that, and so I do see that as a benefit and not a flaw of Protestantism. So yeah, hopefully that's what you meant by that argument. If it is, hopefully that was a good answer. In all caps, do I believe in the Eucharist? If not, how do I justify 1 Corinthians 11:29? Or John 6:30 ad infinitum? I do believe in the Eucharist. Next question. Oh, this is a delightful question. Okay, how much has being out of the college bubble and being a newlywed changed the way you look at things, especially theologically so? Fascinating. So Eliza and I just had our 1-year anniversary on June 3rd. So that was exciting. And I would say that being out of the college bubble has changed the way I look at things in a lot of ways. So within the college bubble, especially at Moody, everyone I talked to loved theology. That's just what they did. And all of my kind of subgroup, not all of it, but I had gathered together a group of people that were really interested not just in theology, but in questions about church history, Catholicism, Orthodoxy, etc. And that made it feel like these are the only questions in the world to explore, which at times brought on just a real anxiety over these questions. And I don't think we do our best thinking when it's becoming overwhelming in that sense. And we kind of have this forced sense of I need to decide right now. And I think in a lot of ways that was kind of paralyzing for me. And so it's been an interesting thing where initially we got married, and as newlyweds, I was just really focused on how do I figure out how to be a husband, which I think is my vocation for the rest of my life, right? Or it is my vocation for the rest of my life. But I think trying to figure that out is something I'll be doing for the rest of my life. And I'll be honest, some of these questions kind of took a back burner for a little bit. I hadn't gone to a mass or a divine liturgy in months until recently. And I think at first it was it's really nice to just breathe for a second, to not be in a place where the only questions I'm being asked are these existential angst-inducing questions. And it was kind of nice to just breathe. But now, a little further removed, my love for it has come back in a lot of ways. I think, in college, all I was doing was reading for school, which was a ton. Moody was a lot of work. Then I was doing all the reading for my interviews, and I was doing book clubs with my friends for fun, which was great, but also just a ton of work. And so I think I needed to breathe. But now I'm coming back, and it's rediscovering my first love again. And so I guess that's more of a history of my passion for theology and my mental state. But has it changed how I think about things theologically? I think I've gotten a new respect for the vocation of marriage. I think growing up, I had this picture of the only worthwhile thing to do was to be in ministry. I think I idolized ministry, but I think increasingly I just have a real appreciation for loving Eliza well, hopefully loving our children well one day, Lord willing, right? And seeing that, like, if my YouTube channel had never existed, right? And I never write the books that I want to write, or, speak on stages, or blah, 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 that you can still just live a beautifully faithful life that is quiet, that is small in some ways, but no less important. So I think that's one way it's changed my theology. Really glad I poured this water. Okay. In all caps, do you believe justification by faith alone? And what's your justification for it? Okay. Cautiously, yes. Here's the reason I say cautiously, yes. I think when I say that I believe in justification by faith alone, it is not the same thing that a lot of people, especially a lot of non-Protestants, have in mind when they think about this idea of justification by faith alone. So I think the common retort is, so you think that you're saved and you don't have to do any works. I would say no. I would say that faith, like, part of faith is works, that you can have no faith without works. And so I think kind of like the dichotomy is unfortunate and unhelpful, and for some reason, and in some ways maybe just like sola fide doesn't achieve its intended purpose. But what if it's trying to say is that we are not saved by the merit of our works, because those works have inherent merit that can ever earn our salvation. If you were an Aquinas, you could be talking about like condign merit here. But if what we're trying to say by justification by faith alone is that we are not saved by simply being good people, or simply being of good works because they merit them in and of themselves, then yes. If we were saying salvation by faith alone, that we are saved by faith, never needing to work and never working, I would say no. I don't think that's what Luther had in mind. I've got freedom of the will here, or freedom of a Christian, rather. We're in Luther, not Augustine, right? And the way he talks in the preface here, I think can be helpful. I won't go through it right now, but Luther just, he doesn't see, at least early on, like that there could ever be a faith without works. But what he's trying to challenge, I think, is that there's this like meritorial system of our works that earn salvation outright. I don't know if I justified it sufficiently, but hopefully that's helpful. Have you heard or listened to Jonathan Pageau's The Symbolic World? I have. I've even had him on the channel. You should watch the video if you have not. Tsar Nicholas II. I don't think it's the real Tsar Nicholas, but I could be wrong. I don't think I am. Okay. Raul Romero, you're closing in on your 2nd anniversary. Congratulations. That is a good and worthwhile thing. Protestants often say Orthodox or Catholic are not saved. Protestants do say that. I disagree with them. All right. Oh, thanks for the congratulations. Can you please explain how you think about understand the Eucharist? Okay, so hopefully I can give I'll leave the question up actually. Hopefully I can give a more succinct answer than I once did when trying to struggle through the 6th chapter of John early into investigating these things several years ago. But if you want to check out that video, you can. Short answer, I believe that Christ is truly present in the Eucharist. What does truly present mean? I'm not entirely sure. I believe that in partaking of the Eucharist, we partake in the very body and blood of Jesus. Great. How do you do that? I am not entirely sure. By the power of God, certainly. By grace, entirely. But what is like the precise mechanism of that? I'm not entirely sure. I do I do have some appreciation for Luther saying like, that's it. Like, that's the body and blood of Jesus. End of discussion. I also recognize, though, like, it's not a good reason to therefore say, those Catholics, like, they're always just getting too scholastic on us, right? Like, well, at some point, other people don't have the luxury that I have of saying, I'm not sure. They get asked more in-depth questions, and then heresies arise, and they're saying, we've got to be more specific than this. And so they work out a definition, and they come up with something like transubstantiation, which I think is a fine and fitting way of describing it. I'm not sure it's the only. And I think that's okay. That is what I think about the Eucharist. Yes. Okay. Have you considered making more content using or focusing on some of the other Eastern Catholic churches, such as the Maronites or Chaldeans? Short answer, yes. Long answer, it's hard to find representatives from these traditions. So when I make videos outside of church tours, when I make interview videos, it has to be a somewhat symbiotic relationship, right? Meaning that the guest has to have something in it for them. For that reason, it's no surprise that usually when I interview people, it's authors of books because, well, they want to sell books. I want to make content. You all want to watch interesting things. We put those things in a blender. Boom, interviews. There's just not a ton of Maronite and Chaldean authors out there, small sample size. If you have like a standard whatever percent rejection rate, that means it's just hard to, one, find them, two, get them on the show. And so while there's probably a lot of great Maronite and Chaldean Catholic priests out there, if they're not writing, there's less in it for them, so it's a harder sell. It's also harder to identify them, like how. It's also hard to know, like, are they going to be good spokespeople? Because ultimately I want people to be eloquent. If you guys are going to give your time and attention to a video that I'm creating, I want it to be worthwhile for you. So for that reason, it's just hard. That notwithstanding, I would like to do it. I would like to do more church tours in that area. They're also just kind of hard to find. I don't have as many beautiful churches around as I did when I was in Chicago, because Chicago is a bigger city than Baltimore is. Baltimore has many beautiful churches. But church tours are also the hardest to pitch because there's not that symbiotic relationship as much. I'm asking a priest to like just give me multiple hours of his time to let me walk around and ask questions about the church. And so I have a higher rejection rate for those. Case in point, I just really wanted to do one at a Ukrainian Catholic church in the area. I couldn't get it done. Really wanted to do one at this FSSP church in the area. Couldn't get it done. But I did get it approved at the Basilica. So we're doing that soon. But if you have recommendations of guests, please do let me know. If you have churches in the Baltimore, D.C. area that you think I should tour, I would love to do that. Have I considered confessional scholastic Lutheranism as a Catholic expression of Christianity? So I suppose it depends on what you mean by Catholic there. If you mean Catholic as like universal, I think I would say that, I mean, it doesn't represent the universal tradition of the church. I think it's rather particular. But if you're saying like, do I think of it as part of, not like pertaining to all, but is part of the Catholic Church, I would say that it is. And if you mean, have I considered it as like becoming Lutheran? I haven't particularly. My struggle with something like Lutheranism is it seems like you're getting like some of those like nice high church elements, but you're just whittling it down to like such a small community. And even within the Lutheran church, like which kind of Lutheran church do we pick? And I don't know. I mean, I think it's fine. I've been to Lutheran churches. I like them. I think there's a lot of great Lutherans out there. Dr. Jordan Cooper, I've enjoyed having him on. I just don't particularly feel like drawn in that direction. It could change. Okay. Yes, I've seen this question a couple times. Sorry, I haven't answered it yet. Have I researched Calvary Chapel, Pastor Chuck Smith, etc.? Dr. Bobby Conway teaches at Calvary Chapel and has a YouTube channel. Christianity Still Makes Sense. Well, it's a great title for a YouTube channel. Like I'm familiar with what Calvary Chapel is, but I can't say I've researched it. No. Sorry. It's probably my least exciting answer yet. But it's a good question. This is the perennial question. Okay, what Catholic and Orthodox doctrines are hardest for you to accept? For Catholic, I would say the hardest, in a way, is probably the bodily assumption of Mary. So I've thought about it in terms of like, if I became convinced of the papacy, I suppose I'd have to accept that, because if I truly believe in the papacy, then that means that I believe in what the papacy has affirmed, and thus I would believe in it. But it's hard for me, at least right now, to envision those things being that intimately connected. I mean, I know they are, like, logically, but it seems as though I could be convinced by certain arguments of the papacy, but it would just feel disingenuous to say that I believe in the bodily assumption. I just don't think the attestation for it is very good. An argument from silence isn't necessarily like an argument. It's not a defeater, right? But like, I don't genuinely believe in it right now. And I've been trying to ask myself recently what it would take for me to believe in that. Something I still have to think through. So that's probably like the single hardest, but I would say the papacy is up there with that. Yeah. I'll say, like, it would be so much easier. I know people like to say, like, it's like wishy-washy, right? It'd be so much easier just to be convinced by the papacy. Like, I could just stop worrying about these things. I'd just be convinced. That'd be so great. In a lot of ways, I kind of feel for it, like the atheists who describe themselves as, what is it, like, I can't think of the word right now, but they say, like, they're not it's not non-combative, but essentially it's like they're willing to believe in it if they're convinced, and they're just not convinced. In a lot of ways, I kind of feel like that about the papacy. For the orthodoxy, sorry, I'm slouching now, and the microphone's in front of me. Sit back up, Austin. What Orthodox doctrines are the hardest for you to accept? So I'll get pushback on this. I think traditionally the belief in the Orthodox Church has been that there is not salvation outside of the Orthodox Church, though I know that is not universally the case historically, though I think it's predominantly the case historically, and it's certainly not universally the belief today. So insofar as that belief can be sidestepped, I suppose we can say that that's not the hardest. But if it were an essential doctrine to say that there is no salvation outside the church, I think that would be hard for me to accept. Outside of that, what are the hardest for me to accept in the Orthodox Church? I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to exclusivity. There's like other more minor things there. But yeah, as I talked about at the beginning, at one point I would say the place of the saints was a difficult one. And Mary, that's changed. I do still, I mean, just because I'm like intellectually okay with prayers to Mary, I do think there are cases in Orthodox theology that still make me a bit squeamish on the place of Mary. I'm thinking specifically of one of like the Akathist hymns to Mary. It just feels a little far to me. That was really high pitched, but yeah. Okay. Next question. Interesting. An evangelical interacts. That sounds like someone who makes YouTube videos. If so, I should check them out. I hope they are fruitful. From your experience, how much of a role does culture play in people's theology? A lot. I think we all, maybe not we all, but a lot of us like to think that we're kind of heads on a stick, that we just kind of have this brain. It thinks things, and we just live out whatever's most logical. But I don't think that's an accurate anthropology. I think we are desiring things. I think we are embodied things. We're not just thinking thingisms. We're full-on humans. And humans live in times and places with social relationships, with cultural relationships, with our own experiences, all of which color the way that we see the world. It doesn't mean that reality is in some way... it doesn't mean that reality is relative, but our experience of it is highly subjective. If nothing else, we are subjects, and we, as subjects, see the world as such. Okay, so I do think that culture plays a role in our theology. I don't even think that's necessarily a bad thing. I just think it's something to be aware of. So I don't think the ultimate theology is some culturalist theology, or some like perspectivalist theology, like as though we aren't affected by anything and we just have like these perfect computers of just like inputs and outputs. I actually think that would be a sad thing. But I do think we should be aware of ways in which our cultural setting can keep us from seeing the fullness of truth and can put blinders on us. C.S. Lewis, in his wonderful introduction to On the Incarnation by St. Athanasius, talks about the importance of reading old books for the very fact that they have different cultural blind spots than we do. And by reading from them, hopefully they can help balance out the blind spots that we have. Long answer to short question. Someone did a super chat. I need to find said super chat because, well, that's just a nice thing. Any pets? I do. Should I grab my cat? So, Eliza and I just got, a couple weeks ago, a cat. She's wonderful. She's delightful. I don't know if this name will strike you all as pagan. If it does, my apologies. Her name is Luna, named after Luna Lovegood, because no character in fiction so resembles a cat as Luna Lovegood. You could argue for Professor McGonagall, and perhaps you'd be correct, but I don't know. She's a black cat. It reminds us of Luna Lovegood. And I know Harry Potter used to kind of be off limits for Christians, but I feel like now that J.K. Rowling has been canceled, all of a sudden it's like cool to like Harry Potter again. I don't know. I just always liked Harry Potter. So yes, we have a cat. Her name is Luna. She was born in January. She's tiny. She's ornery. Can you see it on camera? She bit me the other day. Not cool, Luna. Anyway, we do have a cat. Ours is not an orange tabby. Do I have a picture of said Luna? I'm sure I do, but she's a cat. I don't know. Okay. Luna likes rosaries. There's Luna with a rosary, with that rosary. So there you go. Yes, we have a cat. Glad you asked. Next question. There was another super chat. Physique. Would you say that Roman Catholicism has a works-based faith? I have trouble with the idea of treasury of merit and indulgences. Your thoughts? Ooh, great question. There's kind of three questions in here. There's works-based faith, and then it's not a question, but I think it's in well, you did say your thoughts. So on treasury of merit and indulgences. Do I think they have a works-based faith? I would say no. I think it is a works-included faith. That's maybe not the best way of putting it. But like, I don't think that the foundation of Catholic soteriology, like their view of salvation, is works. But I do think works are involved in the Catholic view of salvation, which I don't think is all that different in some ways. Like I do think that within any plan of salvation, works are going to be a part. The question is just, are they a causal part? So within Protestantism, even within like a strict sola fide setting, you would say that works are a part of your ongoing sanctification, but you would make that distinction between justification and sanctification. Conversation for another day. But so even there, works are involved. For Catholics, you would not make such a clean and tidy distinction between justification and sanctification. Therefore, works would be involved in both. I don't think that makes it works-based, but I do think it includes works into the conversation of salvation. Perhaps not as the cause. I think you could say the principal cause is Jesus Christ, but in our cooperation in his actions, that works would be a part of it. So no, but works are integral. You have trouble with the idea of treasury of merit and indulgences. Yes, me too. First, on treasury of merit, I think it's kind of an odd extrapolation. So there are principles within it that I would agree with, namely the communion of saints. But to me, it does strike me as just like this kind of odd extrapolation, like just running a bit too far afield theologically. With that being said, though, I do want to rein that in because I'm fully within a rebuke from Catholics, within room for rebuke of saying, you don't understand the treasury of merit, Austin, to which I would respond, you are probably right. And then I would respond, do you know people who understand it really well? Because I would love to interview them. It's a topic I want to explore because I don't get it. But I trust that it makes more sense when explained well than it does currently to me. Just a little theological point here. I think most of the time, whenever we're able to kind of knock down an argument really quickly from a tradition that has been around for thousands of years, we're probably not setting up a steel man, but a straw man. So if I were to try to tear down the treasure of merit, I think I would inadvertently be creating a straw man simply for ignorance. So I'll refrain from saying too much there. Indulgences. I know only slightly more. The important point here is that indulgences were often taught to me as buying your salvation. That is incorrect. So the idea behind indulgences is that you are gaining, how do I want to say this? You are gaining relief from the temporal punishments of sin. I believe that's correct. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. But that it's not like your eternal consequences of your sin are being forgiven, but rather that there's a remittance of the temporal punishments. So if you have like a penance system, and you were to then give alms to the poor, instead by buying an indulgence, you're instead diverting those funds away from that temporal punishment. It's not something I like, but I do think my original understanding of indulgence is incorrect, and I'm working to have a more correct understanding of it. And in the meantime, I'm trying to withhold judgment. Great question, and thank you for the super chat. Okay, there have been questions coming in the meantime. Chess Player says, I like your glasses and your hat. Soon, said Gospel Simplicity hat will be available by going to gospelsimplicity.com and clicking on the merch button, but it's not yet. This is from a new provider who has much higher quality than Teespring. I'm unhappy with Teespring. I don't like the quality of their prints. I have new designs coming out. They're beautiful. One is in Latin, but I just have to migrate all of the old designs over, and it's kind of a headache. But soon it will be available, and I will make it. I'll let you guys know. But thanks, Chess Player. Chess is fun. Okay, Will asked, I'm almost out of water, at which time we will have to end this stream. Have you ever taken a look at Mormon theology, and have you considered bringing someone on to discuss? Also, thanks for the answer earlier, and have a blessed day. Will, I hope you have a blessed day as well. Have I ever taken a look at Mormon theology? Only cursorily. Is that an adjective? I think only in a cursory manner. So I took a class on the history of American Protestantism. Within that class, we had to do some work on what I would call non-Protestant cults. Ooh, scary word. Hope that doesn't offend. So yeah, we did some work on that. I think I had to do a presentation on Mormonism. We did just kind of a brief overview of Joseph Smith, all of that. But honestly, no, I can't say I'm super well versed in Mormon theology. And have I considered bringing someone on to discuss? I haven't really. So I've considered expanding the scope of what I do. In fact, I filmed an entire tour of a Baha'i temple in Chicago, but I've never published it. Why haven't I done that? Well, part of what you want to do on YouTube is have a niche, right? My channel is already quite broad, but in other ways, it's quite focused. I'm trying to bring simplicity out of theological and historical complexity, showing beauty, truth, and goodness from within the Christian tradition. I would consider Mormonism as outside of the Christian tradition, which would expand the scope of the channel, as would Turing said Baha'i temple. And so I'm reticent to do that because I like the focus of my channel and I don't want it to be muddied. I would delight in doing that because I enjoy engaging with people with whom I disagree. But if I did that, I think I would spin that off into a different channel, which is why I'm still holding on to that tour video. So, kind of. Okay. You said your aunt's cat is named Luna after Lovegood. Your dog's name is Vesta, so if that ain't pagan, don't blame us. She chose it. Her brother grabbed one of our rosaries once, actually. Right? So, how pagan can Luna be if she loves a good rosary? It's probably also just I like of the tactile nature of it. Okay. Super chat. How did I miss it? Theodore Warner. Great. Can you talk about your method for assessing a doctrine like the papacy or Eucharist? Is it purely intellectual, prayerful, both? More so one than the other? Great question, Theodore. It also made it very big, so like your icon here is huge. Anyway, my method. Okay. I generally try to take it from, let's say 3-ish angles. So, historically, is there good attestation for this belief? If we're going through something like the bodily assumption, I know you didn't put that in there, but let's put that in there, right? One reason I really struggle with the bodily assumption of Mary is because I don't think there's good historic attestation. However, history isn't the only method we can look at. Another method we can look at, or another way of looking at it, would be through Scripture, which is even more important than history, I would say. Than history qua history. We could talk about tradition, and maybe I would answer that differently. But anyway, so biblically, I think the attestation for the Assumption of Mary could be slightly more interesting from a biblical perspective, but I don't think it outweighs the kind of dearth of evidence historically. However, there would be another area, which I would call kind of practically. So, like, what are the implications of this for a life of prayer and faithfulness? In that case, I think it's a pious belief that it could have good ramifications. It could remind us of our that we one day will be resurrected from the dead, that we believe in the resurrection of the body and the life to come. Amen. Right? So I generally look at it from those three perspectives, like tradition, so history, tradition, Scripture, and also kind of what are the implications of this for life and practice. I think that's how I look at it. But like I said, of looking at things culturally earlier, I probably also think of it just through, like, I don't know, intuitively. How does this feel? And we intuit things based on a variety of reasons because of our own experiences and all of that. So maybe that's a fourth reason. Could we call that? Okay. Questions. Jacob said indulgences are real and the best thing ever. I'd love to know why. Who should I talk to about this? Christian, have you considered the possibility that Protestantism, hard word, lots of T's and S's, can be true, not only because of sola scriptura, but also because it is actually more patristic? So have I considered the possibility that Protestant? Yes, absolutely. I am still currently Protestant. I'm not sure that would I say it's more patristic? I think only selectively. I mean, it's really hard to define, right? Like Protestantism. Like, what is Protestantism, right? What is it? It's more aptly like an adjective describing a group of things than a noun that is like showing like, oh, all of these things are Protestant. Like, there's only one Protestant. It's kind of multivalent. Anyway, so I think there are aspects of the patristic tradition that point towards certain Protestant beliefs. I think there are aspects of the patristic tradition that point away from it. On balance, does it favor it more one way or the other? It depends on what you're weighting the most, I suppose. I wouldn't say that's my reason for being Protestant, though, but I've considered that possibility. Good question. And is that Luther? Let's pull that back up. Is that Luther in your thing? Christian, let me know. Is that Luther? It kind of looks like Luther. Maybe I don't know. So chess player said chess is fun. Yes. Okay. Alex Brown asked, what are your thoughts on the doctrine of universal reconciliation? Alex, I did answer this question earlier. So when the stream is done, I encourage you to scrub back and check that out. The short answer was I really would love it to be true, but I'm not sure that, I don't think if we have a high view of the ecumenical councils, it's allowed for, unless we want to do some interesting historical hermeneutics there. So I would love for God to be a universalist. I don't know that scripture and tradition leave a ton of space for us to be universalist. Okay, Lagus. Oh, I've got to get to this next question though. So what are your top 3 Bible translations? I primarily read out of the ESV. I primarily read out of the ESV. I don't know that I have like a top 2 others. If I was doing like kind of deep like grammatical study, I'd maybe use the NASB. And if I wanted to sound pretentious, I would say, oh, I like the Vulgate in Latin because I took Latin. But if I'm being honest, I don't read Latin that often anymore, which is a shame. I spent a lot of time learning Latin, and my Greek is far worse than my Latin is. But I don't know. It's not something like, I know people like to really debate Bible translations. Like the one that's going to get you to read scripture is the best one. As long as it's like as long as it's faithful. But I don't lose a lot of sleep over it. I mean, I'm going to get myself in trouble there, so I'll just cut myself off. Tell us about your coffee setup. This is what you guys really came here for, right? So some of you might have seen that I did some sponsorships. Wow, that hair is great. With a coffee company. And in those videos, I filmed myself making coffee. Okay, so I purposefully hand ground coffee in that video because I didn't want to come across too pretentious, but you did ask. So with the excess of money that we had from our wedding, we splurged. Eliza and I love coffee. Eliza's dream is to open a coffee shop. And so we said we'll never just have money like this laying around. So we did the really responsible thing and bought overpriced coffee stuff. So we use a niche zero grinder, which is fantastic. I can't recommend people spend the money on it, but it's fantastic. I use some type of electric kettle. I think it's from like JockU. I don't have the fellow one. On weekdays, I do V60 pour overs. I'm primarily a fan of like single origin light roast coffee for pour over. And then on the weekends, I do lattes. I'm pretty strict with like my sugar intake during the week. Eliza tells me it's dumb and that I should enjoy life more. And so she makes lattes every day. But on the weekends, I do make lattes, and we have a Flair Pro 2 lever espresso machine that we use for that with the niche zero grinder. And then we have a Breville coffee or milk frother that we use with that. It's kind of over the top. I also sometimes use an AeroPress, but generally during the week it's V60, and on the weekend it's the Flair for espresso. And my drink of choice for espresso is actually a cortado of late. So there you have it. You didn't think you were getting coffee advice today, but William, there you go. Okay, I am going to have to wrap this up soon, but there's a super chat in here, so I got to get to the super chat. Thoughts on Marian apparitions? Stop. I can't say it. Okay, I read Our Lady of Kibeho? I don't know how you say that. Jimmy Akin has a good podcast on YouTube. I'm not familiar with Our Lady of however you say it, and I've not seen the podcast from Jimmy Akin. But before I go any further, I should say thank you for the super chat. So kind. Love that. Okay. My thoughts. I just watched the Fatima movie, which was really, it was really nice. It was a good movie. I don't have a lot of thoughts on them because I really haven't looked into them all that much. In terms of like, discerning Catholicism, Orthodoxy, etc. Like within the Catholic Church, there's not like a requirement to believe these, and so it just hasn't been something like that I've tried to check off the list of like what's my stance on this. I think I like that they inspire a sense of enchantment and wonder in the world, and a living and active faith. I haven't looked into them enough to know if I should like classify it as pious myth or like real, like today, a miracle today. I hope like pious myth didn't come across offensively. But what I mean is like, I don't see them as bad things. I see them as like hopefully true, but haven't looked into enough to confirm that. And yeah, anyway, but Fatima as a movie was good. Okay. Someone said, whoa. Ah, okay. You said whoa because you watched James Hoffman. I too watched James Hoffman. Have James Hoffman on for the ritual and spirituality of coffee. That would be a fascinating episode. I should make an episode just on coffee. But yeah, Eliza and I have actually gotten into roasting coffee a bit. Again, that's her dream. And I support it. She's taking classes on coffee. We also recently went to a latte art class at a coffee lab in DC. We're in deep, people. We're in real deep. You didn't come out knowing that, or you didn't come in expecting this. William, you did it right. You said that he said he went to Italy on a honeymoon and came home and bought an espresso machine with the leftover wedding money. It's a good time to do it. Okay. Are there more questions here? Let's see. What are we at? We are at 8:22 Eastern Standard Time. Okay. That's also... Oh. I thought you were telling me my argument was bad, which would have been fine. But you weren't telling me my argument was bad. Well, people, that seems like a good time to wrap it up. David Anders for indulgences. Thanks. So I will keep that name in mind. It is indeed Luther that is in this picture. So we are all learning things today. Yeah, I think this is a good time to wrap it up. There are lots of things in here, but we can only get to so many of them. I am all but out of my water, and my voice is not going to work long. The important answer in question today, the answer is no. Just kidding. The answer is not no. We can still be friends if you drink Folgers Instant. We can't be friends if you come to my house. I offer to make you coffee in any style you want, and you say Folgers Instant, at which point I would just be offended and tell you to leave. So let's end on that note. Just kidding. I wouldn't tell you to leave. But drink whatever you like. It's all fine. It's all fine. Deep breaths. No. Yeah, I don't really care. Someone said, bless you and Eliza in your marriage. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. I could do this all night, but an hour and a half is probably a good time to wrap it up. Oh, but I'm having so much fun. Jesse asked, what am I reading right now? I am currently reading, I just bought Contraception, Deception, and Theology of the Body for Beginners. So I'm reading those. And then I'm reading... What else am I reading? Oh, yes, book club. Let's end with a plug for the book club. I am reading The Book of Pastoral Rule by St. Gregory the Great with my patrons. And if you want to join the Gospel Simplicity Inside Circle Book Club, you can do so by going to patreon.com/Gospel Simplicity, and joining at any tier gives you access to the book club. Blah. Okay, but for real, I am reading that, and I had to plug it because, I don't know, I'm a YouTuber. Is that what you're supposed? I'm not really a YouTuber. I just kind of do it. Anyway, that's what I'm reading. Oh, I'm also reading Crime and Punishment. And it's delightful. I've talked enough. This has been wonderful. Okay. Well, thank you all so much for joining. I am officially out of water. It is time to call it a night. But thank you all so much. This has been a pleasure. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to give it one of those thumbs up. If you're not subscribed and you've stuck around for an hour and 25 minutes, you should subscribe. And if you want to support the channel, you can do so at the thing I mentioned, and I think it's in the description. Anyway, such a pleasure being here with you all tonight. If you enjoyed this, leave a comment down below saying, hey, I enjoyed it, and you should do it again. I will consider doing that. With all that being said, until next time, go out and love God and love others, because truly above all else, that will change the world.